Well, good morning. Welcome to The Verdict. I'm Kent Myers, and I'm flying solo today. Mick Cornett is out on doing other interesting things, but he will be back in a couple of weeks. We're really pleased you tuned in today because we've got the first of a two-part series, and we hope that you'll enjoy it. It deals with charter schools in Oklahoma. In the first session today, we're going to be talking with Senator David Holt about, if you want, the pros of charter schools and why do we have them and what do they offer that is unique and exceptional, and explains why we have them. Next week we'll have Representative Scott Inman kind of presenting the other side of that picture. Scott will be doing a show called Second Thoughts on charter schools. So we hope this two-part series will be very informative for you. I know it will be for me. To learn a lot about charter schools and where they are and why we have them. So we're going to take a little break now, but we will be right back with Senator David Holt. You're watching The Verdict.
One of the reasons why I moved to Rockaway is because it's such a diverse culture and different ethnicities. And my camera has opened some doors to really meet people that I probably wouldn't have gotten to meet without it. I'm Beth Perkins, I'm a professional photographer, and I'm Chickasaw. It came in as like a mini tidal wave. Everything sustainable had just disappeared in one swoop, and I just underestimated this power, and I realized really how little we are in this whole scheme of things and how quickly things can go bad. My community is still rebuilding, and for them to just show up out of the blue and just start clearing out my house was, I'm not one that likes to ask for help. So for someone to come and do that for me it was really touching and humbling. I've thought about the history of the Chickasaws and what they went through as far as relocating and losing their homes and having to rebuild and to thrive in the end after all of that is just a true testament to the Chickasaw strength. And I try and draw from that and remember that that's a part of who I am.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to The Verdict. As I said in the opening, we're really pleased today to welcome the Honorable David Holt, Senator from District 30 here in Oklahoma, Northwest Oklahoma City generally. David grew up in Oklahoma City, was a Putnam City Panther, I am told, but at the time he was at Putnam City, was also named a National Merit Scholar. Did his undergraduate work at George Washington University, did his law work at Oklahoma City University, where he has also served as an adjunct professor from time to time. Among other things, he has been the former chief of staff to my co-host, Mick Cornett. And David served the mayor with honor and distinction, and I know how treasured he's considered by the mayor as well as the folks at City Hall. He is an author. He is an advocate for children and the disadvantaged. He has received many awards for his citizenship and his patriotism and his service in the Senate, and we're really pleased to have him back for the third visit to The Verdict. David, glad to see you.
Thank you for having me. Do I get a special jacket for being on the third time? Is that a new club I've entered?
Yes, you'll be able to put it on when we leave. It isn't a green, it's a pale blue, or whatever that means. Well, the session has not been over too long now, but could you summarize for our viewers the high points and, if you will, also the low points, if any, of the recently adjourned session?
Well, it was largely uneventful, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes people portray lack of action as a positive. I don't necessarily view it that way. I think we really still could be pushing on a lot of important issues. The thing we're going to talk about today, charter schools, is among them, although we did make some progress in that area this year. I think we're, as a state government, really need to find a vision, what it is that we are trying to accomplish as a state. You know, you mentioned my time at Oklahoma City. Our secret to success there was creating a vision. You know, we wanted to be a world-class city when it was clear that we were not.
Yep.
And then we set about, you know, finding the action items that made that possible. You know, an NBA team or quality of life amenities downtown. You know, I think at the state level, we're still struggling to just set that vision. So I thought this session sort of exemplified that, in that we didn't really have anything that anyone will particularly remember. You know, there was not one bold thing. Having said that, there were some positive things. You know, we did manage to navigate a budget shortfall, and in the Senate particularly, but in both bodies, we did it in a more transparent way than I think we've ever done. You know, our budget process is always justifiably criticized for being behind closed doors. Even the members of the legislature don't get to see what the final budget is until hours or days before they vote on it. The Senate did performance hearings for the large agencies this year in public for hours on end, which sounds like something we should do every year, but it's not. It was a new experience for us. And we also, and this is probably the biggest takeaway I would want to leave your viewers with, leave them with this number, we also, for the first time in the state budget, accounted for the total state budget, the actual state budget. Because a lot of times policymakers and the media repeat the appropriated state budget. It's the dollar amount that we as the legislature actually appropriate. We say how to spend it. There is, however, 3 times as much that is spent through laws that have already been passed, or through agency pass-throughs, or through federal dollars that come to the state for us to manage. And that number ended up being $24 billion.
Wow.
$24 billion. So a lot of times people who think they follow the state, the state affairs, think that that number is somewhere around $7–8 billion.
That's usually what's reported.
That's usually what's reported. That is the number we spend at the state legislature, but the true state budget is at least $24 billion, and we put that in the budget for the first time this year. And so I'm hopeful that people will begin to speak about the budget as they should using the $24 billion number, because that's more truthful. It would be as if the federal government didn't talk about Social Security or Medicaid, because those things are handled, kind of off the books. But they don't. They talk about their total federal budget, and that's what we should do here. So that was the one positive. I guess the negative, and it's quickly forgotten, but early in the session there were a series of very embarrassing legislative proposals that weren't just introduced, that's impossible to control, but actually made it through committees. And you may recall, we in Oklahoma, for every reason, for justifiable reasons, try to forget, but there was a period there for several weeks where it was national news every 2 days, something that was coming out of the legislature. We've got to stop that. We now see that kind of behavior coming out of my state party of late, embarrassing statements, things that really are outside of mainstream public opinion. We've got to do better. We've got to take it more seriously, and I think that was the one flaw I would cite about this year's session.
Well, let's stay on that for a second, and then I want to back up
to
talk about the budget and the meeting program. But is there a way to filter out those embarrassing type pieces of legislation? As you point out, you can't stop somebody from filing it.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily have to come out of committee. How does the Republican leadership implement a program to kind of filter those things out?
Well, somebody might say, well, let's not have those bills be heard,
Yeah.
That's one way, but a much easier way that's cleaner and doesn't feel as heavy-handed is let's as individual legislators vote against those bills. You know, one that got a lot of attention was abolishing the advanced placement program in the state of Oklahoma.
Yes.
You mentioned I was a National Merit Scholar. I went to GW. When I arrived at GW, because of my advanced placement, I had a whole semester of education under my belt, of college credit that I didn't have to pay for at GW, which I assure you was a nice savings. And the advanced placement program not only helps you succeed in your college career and therefore your professional career, it also gives you, an academic rigor in high school that is laudable and something we should aspire to. It is completely outside of mainstream thought that we should do away with the advanced placement program. However, that passed out of the House Education Committee. If it had been considered and voted down, I don't think it would have been a national story, but it passed out of committee. So, I mean, we as individuals just have to do better. We have to cast the right votes. And part of the problem, this could go into a whole nother show, because part of the problem is the way we run elections. I mean, a lot of our colleagues are fearful of a small minority of people who do not represent mainstream opinion because of our extremely low turnout, closed primary process. Now, one of the things I haven't mentioned, but one of the big things I worked on this year was election reform, trying to create higher turnout, trying to create maybe a system where all voters come to the table and choose their legislators instead of a small minority.
Open primary?
Oh, some version of that. My ideal would be all candidates on the ballot, all voters invited to vote. You know, it's basically how we elect mayors, except that I would add the party labels. That's where we need to be heading if we want to ultimately have people who represent mainstream opinion making these decisions.
We've just got about a minute left in this segment. Let me ask you about the budget process. As you pointed out, it's much criticized, at least for the reason that the people who have to vote on it don't get to see it.
Right.
Although they've been in session for several months, they don't get to see it until the last day or maybe 2 days of the session. Why can't we do something quicker on the budget? And so have people look at it, more time to look at it.
We can. I mean, it's about control. I mean, if you spent your whole legislative career getting into those positions where you can be one of the 5 people who gets to know what's going on for 3 or 4 months, it's probably not your first instinct to dismantle the whole process and let everybody be a part of it. A different way to do it would be to have maybe split it out into spending bills on each topic, have those bills going through committee process for 3 or 4 months, have them get amended, have them get attacked, have them get considered instead of this take it or leave it approach that we have. That's just pretty radical, and it involves it involves the giving up of control and power. And I laud Senate Pro Tem Brian Bingman, Appropriations Chair Clark Jolly, and Vice Chair Greg Treat for giving up more control and power than anyone ever has before, by just allowing people to even have a voice.
So it may be a gradual process.
It's a gradual process. Everything at the Oklahoma State Legislature is incremental, that's for sure.
Well, one thing that isn't gradual is our need to take a break.
Okay.
So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back talking to the Honorable David Holt, Senator from District 30, about charter schools. We'll get more into charter schools after the break. You're watching The Verdict.
People have been talking about energy independence for a long time. It's always been popular, but today it's possible.
We have an enormous supply of oil and gas in the United States, much more than we thought just a few years ago.
New technology, massive new discoveries, largely made by Oklahoma companies. It literally changes everything.
And Oklahoma is leading the charge. Go watch this video to see why. Energy independence starts with us.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. That's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers sitting in by myself today. Mick Cornett will be back in 2 or 3 weeks. We are talking today about charter schools. We haven't talked much about it in the first segment. We're about to with Senator David Holt. David, what is a charter school?
Sure. Well, first of all, I always say this: it's a public school, you know, and that's important because people will get kind of sloppy with their terminology and may imply that it's some sort of private school when it is certainly absolutely a public school. What it is not is a neighborhood school. It's different from that. It is essentially operationally deregulated. You know, it's a public school that doesn't have to follow the rules that we have accumulated over regular public schools for a century. They could go till 5 o'clock. They could pay their teacher, pay their science teacher $60,000 and their PE teacher $25,000. They could start school on August 1st and end it on July 4th. I mean, they can do a lot of things that they want to do. They have an autonomy. They answer to a board that governs their school, and they ultimately answer to the entity that might have authorized them. But they do not answer to the school board of your district. What they also answer to that a school district is not is the people. They're essentially a free market concept. Nobody has to go to a charter school. You choose to go to a charter school. And so I love that about it. It introduces choice into the education monopoly. It introduces the free market. Competition has helped every human endeavor since the beginning of time. It doesn't. The success of Burger King has never put McDonald's out of business. It's made them both better. And that's what we, being a charter school advocate or a school choice advocate, believe, is that this introduces competition into something that the provision of public education that has gotten a bit stale and has failed a lot of people. And this concept of a charter school, having a sort of autonomous, deregulated public school that competes in the free market for students, is actually a very bipartisan concept historically. The very first charter school bill that was passed in the nation was a Democratic state senator in Minnesota. And I've been to the National Charter School Conference, and I would wager when I look around that room that 2/3 of the people are Democrats. I mean, it's because often in the highly urbanized, highly Democratic areas is where the schools are the worst, and they need more options. And we're starting to experience that here in Oklahoma City. I mean, so 2/3 of the schools in Oklahoma City are D or F schools, and under the state grading system. We young families need more choices. My son is in Oklahoma City Public Schools. We need more choices. And so that's why I've become such an advocate for innovation, which I consider charter schools to be one. We need more options, we need more competition, we need more people given the power to try new things and provide something that will draw inner city families back into the city, or obviously provide education, a good quality education to those inner city families right now that don't feel like they have it.
Let's talk about a charter school. How many do we have in Oklahoma approximately?
About 25 brick and mortar charter schools. Now that's not a whole separate issue about virtual charter schools, and those exist too.
Basically
kind
online.
of a niche though. Yeah. That's kind of a different niche than I think we're talking about today. About 25, really just in the two urban areas, Oklahoma City and Tulsa, because that's kind of how the law has been written until this year. We need so many more than that. As an example, New Orleans, since Katrina, decided to go all charter, essentially. 90% of the students in New Orleans are in a charter school.
Does it cost more for a family to put their student in a charter school than it does in Oklahoma City public schools?
No, well, I mean, it doesn't cost anything, to the family. It's still a public school. How it works, operationally is if a student ends up going to a charter school, the state operational dollars will follow them. With a little bit taken out that goes to the school district that authorized the charter school. So actually, charter schools do more with less. And they have no resources for capital. So they often have to raise money. There's no provision in our state law for the buildings that charter schools are in. So they often have to raise money or find some other way to maintain their buildings, whereas a regular school district has the bond issues and the taxing authority.
How long have we had charter schools in Oklahoma City and Tulsa? Just approximately.
A decade or so. Yeah.
Have there been any, as you see it, adverse effects on the non-charter public schools in those jurisdictions that have them?
Absolutely not, but you know, I don't think we've seen enough benefit because I don't think we have enough charter schools. I mean, I think if we need more charter schools in Oklahoma City, which would give more high quality education options, but I also think it would put more pressure on the standard regular schools to raise their game and compete.
You mentioned that the Oklahoma City public schools and Tulsa public schools, by and large, are D&F public schools.
Yeah.
Are there similar ratings for charter schools?
Yes.
And what kind of grades do they
Sure.
get?
As a matter of fact, half of the A schools in Oklahoma City public schools are charter schools.
Wow.
I mean, you know, the data speaks for itself. And then I wanted to complete one thought about New Orleans.
I'm sorry, yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, sure, no. About New Orleans, they have 90% charter schools.
Right.
In the time period that they've done that, their African-American rates of proficiency have doubled. Their F schools, which was like 70% when they started this, have gone down to 10%. It makes a difference. When you give educators the ability to create what they think is the best system for educating and innovate instead of being hampered by all the rules that we've put on them for a century, they come out with great results. We need to unleash that for the benefit of our students and our young families. We as a state are very behind, and we as a city are falling very, very behind. We are finding that young families are either moving out, just as they did 30 years ago, with all the success that we're having as a city. They want to live in the inner city, but they find when they have school-age kids, they're either moving out or they're going to private school.
Are we making any headway in getting charter schools, for instance, in downtown Oklahoma City? I think we have one, do we not?
Well, obviously the John Rex Charter
Yes.
School has been a huge success, has a huge waiting list. Why do we not want to emulate that? Why don't we want to have 20 John Rexes in Oklahoma City? You know, it's as if we are letting defenders of the status quo hold us back, and eventually, you know, I think the young families of Oklahoma City just aren't going to take it anymore, and I see that momentum growing. I mean, I think it's the issue of our time.
What's your thought about the argument that more charter schools drain resources from existing public schools who are struggling anyway, and they're just going to make the existing non-charter schools more deficient than they were before?
Sure. Well, I'm glad you asked that. Several responses to that. First of all, the suburbs and private schools have already drained a lot of the most, you know, ambitious students with the most determined parents. So the idea that, you know, that the problem with an education monopoly is it's not really an education monopoly because people do have the choice of moving and they do have the choice of paying for private school. So I'm hoping to have good schools, probably charter schools, so that we can bring people back in that have already left the Oklahoma City public school system. Well, and the other response is, if you believe in school choice, as I do, you believe, as I said earlier, that competition makes all parties better. And so I don't believe in the theory that it ruins the schools that are left behind. You know, I believe it makes them raise their game because they see they've got to do something.
Is there competition among the existing school teachers to teach in charter schools? I mean, do they want to teach, and is there a waiting list for teachers?
I don't know as much about that. What I do know is every time a teacher in regular schools tells me the ideal system, they want to be deregulated. They want all this regulation that the state puts on them to be taken away.
Want to be innovative.
Yeah, they want to be innovative. They're describing a charter school, you know. And sometimes I'll say, why don't you, you know, don't you like charter schools? Oh no, I hate charter schools, you know. And I think what they're really saying is they want to play by the same rules, which I'm for. I mean, if I were king of the world, I would essentially let all schools have this type of deregulation.
David, we only have about 30 seconds left. Final thoughts on charter schools for our viewers. What will you tell our viewers about the pros of charter schools?
Well, I mean, the only way to ultimately save urban schools, and it's demonstrated in city after city that has already gone down this road, is to have innovation, school choice, and charter schools have been the answer in many other cities. There may be other things we can try, like ESAs, but charter schools are a proven success story, and we have got to embrace them in the state of Oklahoma and in the city of Oklahoma City.
Well, we're going to have you back because we didn't get to talk about rural charter schools.
Sure.
We will do that at another time,
Sure.
but that's got to be the last word for this show. You've been watching Senator David Holt discuss charter schools. We'll take a break and be right back.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here. I drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago, I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I really think people are so unaware of the number of kids waiting just in Oklahoma. And I think if more people knew that those children were out there waiting, I think that just by the way we live our lives and the people we talk to, that maybe we can help encourage adoption from Oklahoma.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to The Verdict. We thank Senator David Holt for giving us his time to talk about charter schools and other matters. Next week, we'll hear the other side of it from Representative Scott Inman. A couple of websites I'd like to give to you for David Holt. It's oksenate.gov, and he's also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We also have a website, theverdict.tv. Get on it and tell us what you'd like to see or hear, and we'll do our best to accommodate. For Mick Cornett, we bid you a good Sunday. That's it.